The Archdiocese of Chicago is a vibrant and diverse faith community. We celebrate our faith through worship, evangelization, and reaching out to the needy. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Welcome to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750. I'm Father Greg Sackwitz along with Mark Teresi. You can also get us on youtube.com/CatholicChicago, youtube.com/CatholicChicago. We are taping this program on a Wednesday for playback today on Monday. So the White Sox have been losing. I think they're continuing to lose anyway. Cubs are doing pretty well. That's the sports reporter on the program. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Good morning. Good. They could lose four more games by Monday when this show airs.
That's true. You're very, very right. We have a great program lined up here this morning on Catholic Chicago. Welcome to Bob Gilligan. Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Good morning. Hey, but the NFL draft is Thursday, so Bears will get a new quarterback. So there's a break.
And with this playback on Monday, we'll find out they probably will get Caleb Williams onto the program.
Number 9 pick.
And so now Bob's title is Bob is the Executive Director of Catholic Conference of Illinois. And Bob, you've been doing this for how many years as the director?
It seems like a dog years forever. 2003 was when I was made director. So you do the math.
21 years ago.
21 years, I know.
And what did you do before you became the director?
I was actually associate director before I became director. And then prior to that, I worked out in Arizona in the legislature as well. So I've been involved in the legislative arena for a long time.
Are you from Chicago originally?
Went to high school here. Yeah, in the western suburbs.
Which
yes.
one?
Oh, Wheaton-Warrenville High School.
Oh, sure.
Yep.
Good football school.
Well, not when I was there.
It is today.
Our basketball team was 8-18, so I'm very proud of that.
8-18.
Yeah.
And then
That's why I'm doing
just
those.
before the program, what got you into this area to the depth that you are today?
Yeah, I've always had an interest in public policy and in politics, and when I was a kid, president who was running in Congress and that kind of thing. So I've always been interested in it, and I had no idea there were jobs in this area. What happened was when I was out in Arizona, I became an intern for a congressman, and then I wound up being an intern at the legislature, and I worked on staff, and then it kind of one thing led to another, and so once you get on staff, some people, when they're on staff in an intern position, they kind of get the bug, and I guess I got it. And so it's one of those things that it's just, there's a lot of us down in Springfield with the same bug.
See, Mark, I know Bob very well going back over 20 years ago. You have a passion for this area. You have a passion and in defending the rights of the unborn. And you move into today's topic, there's an incredibly important topic on the table right now in the General Assembly. It would legalize assisted suicide.
Correct.
Am I right?
Yes.
Could
Yes.
I, as a layman, and probably for our listeners, actually, what is the job? What is the job as executive director?
Yeah, basically my job is to go to Springfield and represent the Catholic bishop's agenda on public policy topics. So we try to get bills passed, we try to defeat bills, we try to get things in the budget funded. So we do a lot of things representing, we're the face of the Catholic Church at the Illinois General Assembly.
Who hires you?
It's a done deal now, Mark. You can't undo it. I was hired by, there was a committee, a board. At the time, Cardinal George was the Archbishop of Chicago. And there was a committee of people that went through, they did a national search, and for some reason I got chosen. So, yeah, they did a whole search of everybody throughout the country. So, yeah, that's how they did.
I'm just curious, and people would be curious too. So, do you meet with the bishops in Illinois regularly, or how do you take their agenda and bring it to
Yeah, we have a
Springfield?
formal meeting twice a year. We have a board of all the bishops in Illinois, plus the auxiliary bishops. We also have 6 lay people on our board who have varied interests, all across the state. We're a statewide organization, so it's not only Chicago, it's the rest of the state as well. And so we meet in person twice a year, but I talk to them a lot. And it depends. Like when topics are hot, as they are right now, I'm talking to them fairly frequently. In the summer when the legislature's not meeting as much or there's not much going on, there's not as much contact. But it's just like, we would communicate. We text, email, call, so we're constantly talking about various things and what to do or not to do and who to talk to and who not to talk to or who we could get somebody to talk to.
But Bob, in your work or ministry, you've had tremendous highs and successes.
Yeah, we have.
And
yeah.
tremendous lows
Sure.
and disappointments
Sure.
in these 21 years.
Yeah.
There have been some times in which you're saying, how can they pass this?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It must break your heart. It breaks our hearts.
The state's changed a lot since I became director in 2003.
You know, what's been the biggest change you've seen in 21 years?
I'd say that the people we are electing now are different backgrounds than they were when I was first around, especially in Chicago. I think in Chicago, generally when I was elected, you had a lot of sort of ethnic Irish, German, Italian, quite frankly, mostly men, who grew up in the church. They may not always support everything we were presenting to them, but they knew the church, they were familiar with it, they were comfortable with it, they know Father so-and-so, and they knew every pastor in their
Some being
diocese.
former seminarians.
Many, exactly. So,
Came out of Quigley.
so there was a rapport there and a better means of informal communication. We were both kind of operating from the same sort of perspective playbook. Now, I think you find like there's more of a progressive element. I mean, there's many people who are elected who there's 2 people in the legislature who live with their parents still. They don't have kind of formal, many of them came from kind of community organizing backgrounds. And many of these people, unfortunately, are not church. They really are not. They didn't grow up in the church, they don't know the church. Some of them do, and they may disagree with fundamental aspects of the church's teaching. So I'm stereotyping a lot of people here, but
Mark,
that's generally the biggest
you just
difference.
said, I never thought about that those in the legislation 20, 30, 40 years ago, many were Catholic, many ex-former seminarians. They grew up in the church, they know the lingo, it was their background, where today that would not be so.
No. I mean, the names Walsh, Dudich, DeLeo, DeMuzio, Viverito, these are all people who I used to deal with all the time. Lyons, Brosnahan, McCarthy. These were all members of the legislature who, I mean, they were part of the church. They grew up. Burke, Dan Burke. So there was a lot of them. Today, that's not as much. That's not the case as much. There's not like a real closeness to the Catholic Church as much as there used to be. So that makes it difficult for a conversation because, we're kind of talking different languages in some ways.
And that millennial generation, too, aren't necessarily affiliated with church or that kind of stuff. Now, your assisted suicide legislation, as you look at that, I'm curious, how do you talk one-on-one to legislators?
Yes.
And how does that work?
Sure. It works in a myriad of ways. Because this bill has not had a hearing yet, we'll ask for meetings. We had time. This thing has been percolating for a while. This has gone on in 10 states, so we kind of knew this was coming. So all summer long, we would just, formal invitations for meetings, and we would sit down, now by Zoom oftentimes, or we're in a coalition with other groups. This is just not the Catholic Church that's opposing this. The disabled community is strongly opposed to it. There's many doctors and nurses who are opposed to this. There's many hospitals, Catholic hospitals in particular, are concerned about it. So we kind of act in a coalition. So we'll sit down and meet with them and talk with them and kind of go over our concerns, and they'll ask us questions. And even now the legislature's in. Just last week I was down there, and a lawmaker who I didn't expect to be particularly concerned or interested about our opinion, and I walked in and I said, Senator, this bill's in a subcommittee right now, so it's not even scheduled for hearing. So if you want to do this later, at some other time when it's more pertinent or more direct, I'll go and we can reschedule it. Just no, sit down. I want to know what you have to say. I want to hear from you. So that's good. I think some of them are trying to figure this out. They're trying to figure out, okay, they know they have people coming to them who want to have the assisted, they want to be able to be prescribed lethal drugs to kill themselves because they fear pain at the end of life. They hear that. They want to know, who'll be against that and why are you against it? And so some are trying to figure this out, and what are the pitfalls of approving
Now, Bob, walk us through, if it's in the General Assembly right now, for legalized assisted suicide, walk us through. What does that mean?
So the proposal would allow a doctor to prescribe lethal drugs necessary to end one's life if an individual presents themselves to a doctor and then goes to another doctor, so you need 2 sort of confirmations that you have a terminal disease, and that you have only less than 6 months to live. That's the expected. And then the person is eligible to be prescribed these lethal drugs. The drugs will come either in the mail to the individual, or they could pick them up at a pharmacy. And due to your reaction, that's a whole bunch of potential issues right there. So that's what they want to do. This has been approved in, like I said, 9 or 10 other states. The proponents of this have been trying this, you guys will remember. Remember Dr. Jack Kevorkian back in the 90s?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
That stems from this. And so the other side is now more sophisticated. They don't have Dr. Jack, the Hemlock Society. They've changed their name to Compassion and Choices. That's a lot more palatable. They now become professionalized in their arguments and their advocacy techniques. So they're more sophisticated in presenting this in a way that these people just want to die a peaceful death. Well, we'll get into this, I'm sure. In other countries that have this and in other states, we're seeing some real serious consequences of that action.
Such as?
Well, in Canada right now, if you've given up on life, you're depressed, you're homeless, you don't have to necessarily have a terminal disease in order to get to euthanize yourself. So we have people just giving up on life and requesting their pills to kill themselves. 3% of all people that die in Canada now are due to their own hands. They're euthanizing themselves.
3%?
Is that what we want? A society where you have problems, you're depressed, you've had a bad whatever, a bad stretch in life. Oftentimes we've had bad things in life happen. People have lived through some really difficult things, but they come out okay.
So right now in Canada, that an individual who's having hard luck on his times, homeless, can't catch a break, can get a pill, go to his room, take the pill, and end his life.
That's correct. That's right.
And how do you theologically argue that to legislators?
We really don't usually use theological arguments per se. This is the way I handle it, and my staff and I, we all have different techniques, and depending on who you're talking to and the kind of the context of the situation. But I'll say things like this, is like, look, I'm not coming in to argue theology with you. I said, look, I'm Catholic. It informs everything I am, what I think, who I am, and our position on this issue. So what I'm going to tell you is informed by our Catholic teaching, but these are largely arguments that pertain to secular society. So what we're saying is this is not good for everybody, not just for people who are practicing their faith. This has got really serious societal consequences, and our faith informs our rationale and our reasons behind my sitting here and talking to you today. And they're usually pretty good with that. They're like, okay, I'm not going to argue theology with them because, in the year we just talked about, most people I'm talking to are not particularly theologically inclined.
Are you then presenting secular arguments?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that are informed by our faith. Sure.
Correct.
Yeah. There's many of them. For example, in Oregon, where this is legal, most legislators don't know this. The proponents in Illinois are coming and say, we need this because I don't want to suffer pain and suffering at the end of my life. That's why we want this. Well, number one, you ask the lawmaker, 6 months, a diagnosis is 6 months or less. You ever met somebody that long outlived that 6-month diagnosis? We all know people. That diagnosis is not necessarily accurate. It could be you. Ted Kennedy, good example, had a diagnosis of less than 6 months. He lived like 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And you know what happened in that time? His lifelong legislative dream of enacting universal health care, Obamacare, happened. He saw many things in those 2 years. He would have missed if he just did this right away. So the other thing, going back to my Oregon example, is in Oregon that they asked people, well, why did you want to end your life? Why are you doing this? And so they have some data. Pain and suffering is 5th most frequent response. You know what the most frequent responses are?
What?
Loss of my autonomy. I can't participate in the things that I used to. I think I'm a burden on my family and my friends. All serious things, absolutely. But there's ways to treat that in society. Through our faith,
but now
social
pain
services.
Actually ranks 5th.
Yeah. And the other thing that lawmakers don't understand is, thank God we live in the year 2024, where medical technology is advanced in such a way that you don't have to experience pain at the end of your life. We have palliative care, which we didn't have 25 years ago. They've made enormous strides in treating pain at the end of life. So we don't necessarily have to experience pain. So you as a lawmaker, my recommendation to you is, and this is what the bishops are saying, there's a better way forward. A better way forward is let's dedicate more resources towards palliative care. We need more palliative care.
Right.
We need better palliative care. But we're on the right track here. And if you feel you're depressed or you're homeless or whatever, well, there's a better way forward. We can help you there through our community, through the church, right? And through secular society by funding.
And not through a pill.
Not through, exactly.
Mark,
Once you put that on the table as an option for end of life, everything changes. Yeah. And we can talk about this more. I think what we really need to talk about, what is the role of insurance companies in the provision of health care? That gets attention.
Stop
makers
there.
Attention.
Mark, take us to
We'll
break.
take a break. When we come back, I also want to ask, my mother-in-law was sick for a long time and really out of it. Mm-hmm. So does the family make those decisions for someone like that? When we come back, I want to hear what you have to say about that. WNDZ, 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. You can go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. We're with Bob Gilligan, Executive Director, Catholic Conference of Illinois. We'll be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned.
Catholic Charities' Loss program was created more than 40 years ago to help survivors of suicide wherever they are in the grieving process. This nationally recognized program continues to offer a safe, non-judgmental environment where survivors of suicide can find community, direction, and resources for healing after suffering the devastating loss of a loved one. Online and in-person services are available for individuals, couples, children, and families of all faith traditions. To learn more, call 312-655-7283 or email loss@catholiccharities.net. Don't suffer alone. We are here to offer loving outreach to survivors of suicide. Contact Catholic Charities today.
We're back, WNDZ, 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. You can go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago with Bob Gilligan, Executive Director of Catholic Conference of Illinois. When we took a break, I said, Bob, one of the things that is puzzling to me is my mother-in-law was really incapable of making a decision like this, even though health-wise she could fit into that criteria. Sure. So is a family allowed to make that kind of a decision for someone?
No, they can't. The way these laws work is that the person has to go to a doctor and the doctor has to deem them capable of making this decision on their own.
Okay.
So a family cannot come in and say, my mother-in-law is at the end of life, we want to end her life. You can't, that's not part of this
So that's
idea.
at least a safeguard.
Yeah, sure. No, it has to be that way.
So if someone's on life support,
you couldn't avail themselves. You couldn't. No.
so it's got to be the individual who does that.
Exactly.
But then, Bob, we all have had times in our lives we really feel so down in the dumps.
Yeah.
Nothing's going right. Your marriage is over. You've lost your job. You've been you've been evicted out of your apartment. And to say now, based on those situation terms, I can end my life.
And when you talk to doctors who are familiar with this issue and palliative care, they'll tell you that the situation you just described is when a person is most vulnerable. They're most vulnerable to making a bad decision in a short term, looking to what? Alleviate the pain and suffering. And if society, we say, oh yeah, that's an option. That's doing a harm to that person. Because as you just said, hey, this is where our obligation comes in as a society. We can help you. This is not the end. There's another chapter in your life. It's going to get better, and here's how we're going to help you get things better. Allowing that person to end their life under a difficult situation is bad public policy.
We all know people, unfortunately, who have committed suicide.
Yes.
in many different ways. I've dealt with more funerals
Yes.
through suicide, which has been devastating. I know this, for someone who commits suicide, in their mind, there is no other way out. There's no other way out. They see no light at the end of the tunnel. And for that person, it's like there's no other option. There's no tomorrow. What in this situation, though, is they go to a doctor, they get assisted by a doctor who prescribes a medicine, then you take a pill. I mean, this is crazy.
Is it a medical doctor, or is it someone that evaluates their psychological state?
Both very good questions. You guys are very good. Number one, there's nothing.
That's why we get the big bucks.
I think I'm getting that same amount. There's nothing in the law that requires the doctor to send a person for a mental health evaluation.
Wow.
There should be.
Yeah.
Some states have done that. Ours does not do that. It's up to the doctor. Well, that's a problem with this bill in particular. And Father Greg, the point you pointed out too about assisted suicide, this is worth knowing. And this is when lawmakers kind of go, oh, I didn't know that. In states where this has been legalized, the suicide rate goes up, obviously, because you have people availing themselves of this. Not only does the assisted suicide go rate up, but so does the non-assisted suicide. That's a term they made up. What they've done social science research. Non-assisted suicide are suicides that are not done this way. So what happens is, it's called the suicide contagion. When the state says something is okay, assisted suicide is okay, that gives the green light to the person you just described, who normally wouldn't have taken their life, as now thinking that, you know what, maybe this is okay. We know there's a suicide contagion factor. You know, this is a crass example, but you know, one person jumps off the bridge and it gets on the news. You know what? Somebody hears that and says, oh, you know, maybe I'll do that too. And that's one of the dangers of legalizing assisted suicide. It creates more suicide in the country. And by the way, you're exactly right. People need to know suicide is a huge public health problem right now. We all are focused on the homicide rate in Chicago and across the country, and we should be. But I think there's like 15,000 homicides in the country. There's like 50,000 suicides. It's a huge problem, and this will lead to more of it,
we need to
not
make
less.
it very clear, suicide is not an option. See, what you just said, Bob, is so true. How many times have we seen an individual in a high school take his or her life, and within that year, 3 or 4 commit suicide, or in a university?
There's the copy effect, or there's a term for that.
Exactly,
Right.
because all of a sudden, well, he did it, she did it, it becomes more acceptable. I guess this is okay. Just to kind of flip gears a little bit, Bob, how can we get involved?
Yeah, that's great. So right now, the bishops in the entire state of Illinois are going to put out a document. It's called The Better Way Forward. And what it's going to say is, it's going to go over some of the issues we've been talking about here. Pain and suffering is not a reason for wanting this. This suicide contagion problem we talked about, the burden on doctors and nurses who don't want to do that, the statements. And it says that there's a better way forward, you know, more social services, better palliative care. And that's going to go out to the parishes all across the state. And so I'd urge everybody who sees this to go to our website, www.ilcatholic.org. It's up on the screen right now.
Give it one more time, though.
www.ilcatholic.org. And there's a landing page, and it's called First Do No Harm. And right now you can see it on your screen, and it goes through all of the materials that we're putting out there. And this is a packet of information that the laity will get, but also, and that's why I'm grateful for you guys doing this today, we need to educate the clergy and the laity.
Yes.
So we have a lot of material in there for a priest or a clergy member or a lay person if they want to educate themselves more. There's a couple questions and answers, some of the things we're talking about here. What is a question with a prescribed answer. There's prayers in there. There's a novena parishes can do. There's a wealth of information in this packet that's going to be sent out. It's going out actually right now. So this interview is very timely and for what people can do. So the specific answer always to that question is call your state representative, call your state senator, and we have instructions about how to do that in that packet. People can go to our website. If they don't know who their state rep is or their state senator, they can find out. They can send a quick message. The bill is Senate Bill 3499. And if you don't want to get involved in knowing all this stuff and you're concerned about it, the simple message to your state rep or your state senators, could you please vote no on Senate Bill 3499? Thank you very much. I'm your constituent.
And this would happen when with the bill?
Well, we hope never. That's our goal, is to make sure it never gets heard. We don't know. If I were a betting man, I'd say that the proponents will wait for after the election. There's a big election coming up in November. And so what happens then, you have some lawmakers who didn't run again or they lost. And so you have a period of time from November till the new members are sworn in that we're very vulnerable, because they're called lame duck sessions. There's a lot of lame ducks. So people who ordinarily wouldn't have voted for this because their district pressure, if they're not running again, they may be so inclined to do so. Or just the opposite could happen. Maybe they thought they needed to vote for this because their party or their friend was going to vote for it. They felt some pressure from their colleagues, and suddenly if they're not running, maybe they don't. So what happens in lame duck, for people like me, it's a very difficult time, because all bets are off. Anything can happen. And in Illinois, we've seen a lot of things happen in lame duck sessions that we didn't think we'd normally see. So that's what we're concerned about.
Now, Father Greg had mentioned how devastating suicide is.
Yeah.
And I worked over the years in parishes with different folk, but Father Charlie Ruby at Catholic Charities works with, that's a whole ministry. Now, it's odd to me that, like, if you're doing a will, you need a witness. What about if someone makes this decision? Do they have to have a witness that says they validate this?
They do. There's two witnesses that people need to get. So it has to be notarized, I believe, and there's a whole form actually in the law that talks about notary. So your friend said that you, as far as they know, you weren't coerced into doing this. But the coercion factor still exists, because the process that I just outlined is that the person picks up the drugs, right? Or they get them mailed to their home. So the doctor is out of the picture. Once the doctor says, yes, I prescribe this for you, he or she, that doctor, those doctors are done. Then you just get it. So what if you change your mind? And in 6 months you're like, you know what? I'm not going to do this. But your family members around, or friends, or bad influencers are saying, hey, Charlie there.
Is your burden to them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that, and there's no way of knowing if that's happening or not. So there's still a coercion fear in that. And by the way, I should add too, the science is not settled on, they say die a peaceful death. We have reason to believe, because there's introduced legislation in other states that would allow somebody to do this intravenously as opposed to ingesting drugs. Sometimes these drugs have very negative effects on people. I don't mean to be kind of gross, but the vomiting, and not everybody takes this easily. So this notion that it's a peaceful death for everybody is just not, it's not true.
The thought that hit me, Bob, and that is, if you need two witnesses to sign off on someone who wants to take their life, but the two witnesses, if their conscience is well formed, saying, I can't sign off on this, to say that, yeah, Charlie, my dear friend, wants to take his life, so I will witness that. I would say, I can't witness to that.
You would hope. And that person would now hopefully counsel them and talk to them.
Yeah, exactly.
As would a doctor, we hope.
But also, you as a priest, people will be coming to you with situations like this that you've never probably experienced before.
Yeah, well,
how do you pastorally handle that?
Yeah, and that's our obligation to figure that out fast, and as we would normally. I think there's some good news in here. The Illinois State Medical Society last year took this to their board, and they had historically opposed it, and they took a position of neutrality last year. Well, just in April, they took the question to their board again, and they're back being opposed. So that's good. And the American Medical Association is opposed. And as I said, disability groups, Misericordia, others are going to get involved. So there's disability community has a lot of credibility. They're very concerned about this issue, as anybody is who is poor and marginalized, who does not have good health insurance.
Yeah.
In the last 30 seconds, any last thought?
Yeah, I would say finally, the role of insurance companies and how they oversee healthcare today is a strong argument on our behalf. Insurance companies get involved. What incentive is there for an insurance company to treat you for your condition if this is an option and they can prescribe this for a couple dollars? That creates a whole different dilemma on the health insurance and the service of medical care for people who are mostly marginalized and poor. And that's a very strong argument in the General Assembly.
That sounds like another program. So I want to thank in a very special way Bob Gilligan, the Executive Director of the Catholic Conference of Illinois, for joining us. Bob, you are always an outstanding guest.
Thank you.
Tremendous.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
You just amaze me with your knowledge, and just spews right off your mouth like that. So we'll be back again.
A lot of practice.
And we pray, we pray this does not get passed.
Right.
Correct.
We move forward. You're listening to Catholic Chicago here on WNDZ 750 AM. Also get us on youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. Father Greg Sakowicz, Mark Teresi. Stay with us. We'll be back after this break. And do not touch that dial.
Good job, guys. I think we got